All right, welcome back to the Rebel Talk podcast, my friends. I am your host, Dr. Michelle Paris. I'm a naturopathic doctor, the clinic director at the Poppy Clinic, and the creator of the incredibly amazing community of women, the Wild Collective. I am popping on to let you know that we are playing some of our most popular episodes over the next month because I'm taking care of myself. I'm going to actually take a bit of a break from social media and the podcast and just really double down on my own healing journey and just giving myself permission to take a pause, much like I would encourage many women in my clinical practice and of our community, that if they need to take a pause, that they let that happen. And so we will not stop the momentum of the podcast. We are not going anywhere. I just need to take a breather for a moment. And so we are going to be sharing with you all of our most downloaded episodes, which I'm sure you're going to love either for the first time or on repeat, because we often need to hear really important messages on repeat. And so I hope you enjoy, and I cannot wait for all of the incredible conversations, meaningful impact that we are going to have when we reconnect on the podcast starting in April. I think we're going to change the name, which I've been feeling for a while, and we may shift how we have the conversations. It's my heart's desire to go a little deeper, to bring more meaningful conversations and to really dissect what makes incredible women leaders, what allows them to be so brave. The reason I started this podcast was for you to get the information that you needed in order to rise up in your own life. And so we're going to do that together. So I appreciate you always coming and hanging out and listening to the podcast. And I can't wait to continue on this journey. So thank you for your support. And I look forward to reconnecting with you in a month's time. Until then, enjoy all the incredible episodes we have lined up for you.
And I teach them and talk to them about all the different symptoms and signs and how their flow was for them when they had it, and that we still get to use this as a powerful tool to now help us navigate the best way for them to move through menopause.
Connection, community, sisterhood, feminine power, the rebel woman, candid and meaningful conversations about health and tapping into your intuitive self. This is the Rebel Talk podcast with Dr. Michelle Paris.
This podcast is brought to you by the Poppy Clinic. When was the last time you felt truly cared for? Like your health provider was invested in helping you find the root cause of your dis-ease and offering common sense solutions to your problems. We think you need an integrative approach, understanding the why you're experiencing the symptoms you're experiencing in the first place, offering functional tests to help provide answers that you need and solutions that make sense for your life. We believe you deserve to thrive in your health and be an invested member in your healthcare partnership. We are an integrative healthcare team providing services such as naturopathic medicine, holistic nutrition, IV vitamin therapy, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, scar release therapy, and live cell blood analysis. And since we believe that community is imperative for transforming your health, we also provide unique community health services. Our women's group, Rebel Tribe, we have a 6-week meditation series. We have solstice meditations, group nutrition services, and mom and baby yoga. We want to transform your healthcare experience. We believe that you deserve such clarity in your health, you can separate poppy seed from soil. And now you know where the clinic name comes from. We look forward to meeting with you very soon. Hello, my Rebel Talk tribe. Like what I did there? I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you for continuing to listen If this is content that you think is valuable for others to know, please share with a friend. It also helps if you subscribe, rate, and review so that this podcast can be more visible to others. This is a mission based in empowerment and transformation, and it's one I think we need to do together. I thank you so much for your continued support. If you do share this, tag me on social so that I can personally thank you. And if there's anything you would like us to do, if you have any feedback, any topics you would like us to cover, I would love to hear from you. Connect with me on Instagram over at Dr. Michelle Paris so that we can continue to do this important work together. Thank you so much. Today on the podcast, we welcome Jen Pike. Jen is a registered holistic nutritionist and a medical exercise specialist. She has a clinical focus in women's health, and she's the best-selling author of The Simplicity Project. She also has 2 cookbooks, The Simplicity Kitchen and The Simplicity Body. She is the founder of the global and revolutionary women's health programs, The Hormone Project, and her new project about to be birthed into this wellness space, Synced. I was really excited to talk to Jen about her new program, Synced, because this is an area of women's health I am totally excited about, passionate about, nearly obsessive about. I understand the potential of helping women revolutionize their health when they understand their menstrual cycle and the phases of their menstrual cycle as their superpower. Jen and I go into a deep discussion about each phase of the cycle and how to understand this as women and use this as a way to tap into your intuition and into your body and understand how you can be structuring your life, your nutrition, your exercise, so that you can continually move forward in your health from a much more nourished standpoint. We talk about a variety of things. We talk about health and her program Synced. We talk about censorship and why we need to be having these really important conversations about how we are accessing health information. She is incredibly passionate about creating awareness of what's happening currently in the wellness space and Google searches. And so this is really important that you check this out and that you create a voice for this important information. Jen is someone I've been inspired by for an incredibly long time. When I discovered her work, I really aligned with her vision of health, the simplicity at which she offers that information, and her incredible wealth of knowledge. I know you're going to love this conversation. I am so excited for you guys to hear her talk about this and understand how you can access her program and everything she has going on. It is such alignment, and it was such a privilege to be able to have her on our podcast so our community could be aware of her magic and all the wonderful things she's up to. I am so excited for this conversation. So without further ado, I welcome my friend Jen Pike. Jen Pike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so thrilled to have you here. I discovered you a couple years back on a podcast, and I was so inspired by you, the way you articulated health information, your passion. You're just someone I've really loved following ever since that moment. So I'm really excited to have you on our podcast today.
Oh, thank you. That's awesome. I'm really excited to be here as well.
So I know you've got some really exciting things that are happening that really align well with everything that we do with our community, and that's your program Synced. And I guess before we jump into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am a registered holistic nutritionist, and I specialize in women's health and hormones. So I've been in the industry for 23 years. I started off as a group exercise instructor and personal trainer and as a medical exercise specialist. So I was working with a lot of different populations, but I loved working with women, probably because I am one. And so it was very easy to relate to them. But one of the things that I realized over the years was that, the exercise was a conscious choice, that this wasn't something that we had to do as individuals. It elevated our life when we said yes to it and moved our bodies, but it wasn't a must. The food was more complicated because it was something that every day you had to get up and consciously think about. And for most people, it wasn't just choosing for themselves. They had a family, a partner. There was a lot of influence and emotion connected to it. And for a long time, working on clients' nutrition and their movement, was what was getting the results. But then I started to notice with my female clients that we were missing something, that their symptoms, their really painful menstrual cycles, not having a cycle, lack of sleep, libido, headaches, acne, all of these different issues that were going on, I just knew in my gut that there had to be something else. And as much as I believed in the power of food as medicine and healing and movement, I felt like I didn't know the full story of what was happening in their body to then be able to create the best type of system for them. And so that is what had me dig a lot deeper into understanding different testing like blood testing, and then further hormone testing like Dutch testing and hair trace mineral analysis and stool testing, and really just trying to understand more about the chemistry of that individual, of that woman. And along the way, the other thing that I had realized was for myself, I had been tracking my cycle since I was 17, out of curiosity. I grew up with my oldest sister, 12 years older than me. And so I was very aware of things like, a period and puberty and different changes in our bodies from a very, very young age. I was 4 when she was 16. So it was, a different topic in our household. I was realizing I was tracking and noting these things in my own body. Why wasn't I applying this to the women that I was working with? And so over the years, these were, different changes in our conversations we were having. And it all happened because I just started to ask them different questions that no one else was asking them. Questions that they, when I initially would ask them about their cycle or about cervical mucus or about different symptoms, and that they would actually shudder at. They would feel so embarrassed to talk about, and honestly, some shame around it. And I just kept normalizing it, and I just continued to have the conversations. And this is a big part of what led me to creating programs like the Simplicity Project and ultimately the Hormone Project. And the more work I did in there, I realized that just like the seasons that we see happening outside, like we live in Canada, here we're in the fall, it's very evident that there is a big shift around us, which impacts inside of us. And as a woman, we have these 4 seasons that happen honestly every single month, and we're not aware of it and we don't honor it. And I know that it is a big reason that a lot of us get stuck and overwhelmed, and it contributes to so many of the issues that we have going on. And so this new program, Synced, that you were talking about in the beginning, this is a movement series that I created that is specifically based on a woman's menstrual cycle and the 4 phases, or for women who are pregnant or who are postpartum or who have hypothalamic amenorrhea or in menopause and no longer have a cycle post-menopause, that we teach them how to use the lunar cycle, the moon mapping, to really tap into these different seasons or cycles within their body to help to feel more balanced, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. And, I'm excited about it. I'm super passionate about this. I've really, to be honest, it's a big thing I've taken on doing this, because no 2 women are the same when it comes to their cycle. But I think this is the only way that it's going to change, is by disrupting what we currently know and giving women permission around the world to start to ask better questions.
Yeah, I think that sounds so beyond incredible. And I really admire you for taking that on, because it is a big feat. And certainly, when you look at, the menstrual cycle as a whole, I could see how you could become overwhelmed of how you address everything to meet every woman.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so incredibly important. And I watched your video on it last night. And, the thing I think I really love to highlight for women is how we've been designed to be a part of this world that is a 24-hour clock, much like, the mitochondrial function of a male.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, we're going directly against our natural rhythm. So why don't we have you walk us through this a little bit, and then how you've structured this? Because I really think this is something that women need to tap into, because it's our absolute superpower. And it's just so amazing that there's a tool like this for them to be continuously practicing this at home.
Yeah, you just said a couple of keywords. Like I have lots of goosebumps right now, which goosebumps are they're one of my body's cues to let me know we are definitely on the right track. So one thing you said is that about it being a superpower. And this is really the thing. And one of the biggest lies that we have been told as women around our period is that it sucks. It's awful. It's a curse. It is painful. You just have to, like dredge through it. It's a rite of passage. And instead, I want women to realize that this is actually a gift, that we, unlike men, we get a monthly report card. We get a daily tuning in and tapping into our body about how we're feeling. And if we resist that and we just keep pushing, like you said, this 24-hour internal clock, mitochondria, like the powerhouse of what's happening in our cells, which we express our life and live it on a cellular level in our nervous system. And for a woman, I always say to people, if you constantly hear yourself saying, I'm so tired, but then you feel this feedback from your body being like, but I'm not physically tired. Like I don't need to sleep. I just need to stop doing and being. That's not your physical body that's tired. That is your soul that is exhausted. And that is coming from pushing and trying to keep up with whatever this exterior paces that you're being told you need to. And so the first step in this program in Synced is they have a video from me, a welcome video that walks them through how to actually understand your body's rhythms. So for the woman who is menstruating, this is getting them to start to track. You also use the word practicing using this tool. And their whole first, I would say at least 3 to 6 months, it might be a bit longer for some other women, is going to be about practicing tuning in and tapping in to not only tracking their cycle, but their symptoms, their sensations, and then starting to be able to map it out over these months to be able to understand what their body's rhythms are. So using an app, if you have a flow, does make it a little bit easier. But for the woman who's on the birth control pill, where she's not really getting a true organic period, that's a chemical withdrawal bleed, the pill is what's controlling the cycle. So we would have her following the moon cycle. For a woman who's not menstruating right now for whatever reason, for a woman who has had a partial or a radical hysterectomy, she would follow the moon cycle as well too. So I walk and talk them through how you would actually do this. And I do this in a video content space because I think it's really important to be able to go back and to listen again. And then we reiterate it and write it in an actual full guidebook. So it's all very laid out. And then once they are understanding how to actually pinpoint, well, where am I at in my cycle? Am I in a follicular phase, an ovulatory phase, luteal, and then, or menstrual phase? That one's the obvious one. Or with the moon. Am I in the waxing moon, the full moon, the waning moon, the new moon? And we'll go into deeper talk about what each phase of these are. But once she can establish that, then I have different calendars for those women. So I have a calendar that is for the woman who is having a shorter cycle, meaning she's probably getting her menstrual cycle somewhere between every 21 to 25 days. And then within that calendar, I break it down so that there is a beginner, there is an intermediate, and there is an advanced approach, and how you would actually move into each of these. And what I communicate is that every month you're going to need a slightly different approach, and oftentimes each week, because your energy, your mood, the world around you, whatever it is that you're processing and taking in, the time you have available is going to shift, and you need to give yourself permission to just lean into a different schedule or routine for that period of time. And then I have another calendar that is set up for the woman who has like a 26 to 30 day cycle. Same approach, beginner, intermediate, advanced. And then I have one that is for the woman who's 31 plus days with her cycle. And for women that have beyond like a 37, 38 day cycle, I have them following the moon to help to create that rhythm. And so I also give sample meal plans so that trying to teach them based on each phase, what are some of the best types of food combinations to really honor and support where we want key hormones to be at in those months. And then what are some of the things nutritionally and lifestyle wise that might increase inflammatory triggers and responses in your body? And how can we start to teach you to mitigate some of that? And I teach them about their sleep, fundamentals of supplementation. And then we also have a private Facebook group where this is where, like, I've actually hired coaches on to help me with this group because I know that it is going to be loaded in the beginning with questions and honestly confusion, because this is the work I feel we should have been taught as a 10-year-old girl and then continued to be taught it through our teens, our 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond. But unfortunately, the women who come into my practice are showing up in every decade of their life, literally, Michelle, knowing nothing about their body.
I know. And you just gave me goosebumps because it gets me fired up, because we in our community group will spend a whole entire session on menstrual cycle awareness. And it is met with such a range of emotions, from tears from postmenopausal women who feel like robbed of not knowing their power, to young moms who are so excited that they get to teach their daughters a different way, a different curriculum, total overwhelm, excitement. I'm so excited for people to experience what you've created, because that sounds so in-depth and thorough. And I'm not sure why this isn't the curriculum. It absolutely should be. So kudos to you for taking that on and putting that out in the space, because it is so needed. And back to that practice piece, it needs to be repetitive so that you can tap into that.
Yeah. And it, I mean, my oldest, I have 2 children, a girl and a boy. My oldest is my daughter, and she's 13. And so, these last few years of when she was being exposed in school to, health and sex education, it definitely, it lit a fire in me to get the work happening more, because I couldn't believe what she was being taught and what she wasn't being taught about her body. And, so that was a big part of it. But the whole piece of these menopausal women that feel like they've been robbed. And so many women say to me, like, God, where were you in my life 10, 15, 20 years ago? And I think it's equally sad yet inspiring for me is that these women do feel like this is what we communicate to menopausal women. You're all dried up. Doesn't matter now. You've lost that, part of your womanhood. And, when it comes to not sleeping and gaining weight around your waist and having hot flashes and depression and anxiety and all of those things, well, that's just normal. Like, it is the way that it is now. And I just think it's total BS. And I look at it very differently. When I'm working with menopausal and postmenopausal women, I go very deep into talking to them about their menstrual history and their lineage. And I talk to them even about, do you know what your mom's health was like when she was getting pregnant with you or when you were inside of her? And I teach them and talk to them about all the different symptoms and signs and how their flow was for them when they had it, and that we still get to use this as a powerful tool to now help us navigate the best way for them to move through menopause. Because we unfortunately group all women, like, okay, all the women who are trying to get pregnant, here you all in one group. All the postpartum women, you're in a group. All of the women in perimenopause, you're in a group, and so on and so forth. And it's just not fair, because we all feel it and we all move through it very differently.
My thought about that came to me when you were talking about this is that it's super challenging in our group to get older women to join. And my theory about this is because they don't feel celebrated, and therefore almost feel intimidated or threatened to hang out with younger women in that kind of space. And what's exciting about what you're offering is this is offering like a foot in the door. Like, it feels non-threatening because they can just purchase it online and get engaged, and then discover how they are, how we learn. Like, we need to celebrate the lineage and the wisdom and, completely shift this conversation. And I just think that's so important. And we are so deficient of that kind of wisdom.
And you know what? This is something where it is not lost on me how challenging this is going to be, because like, I know the group that's going to be the hardest for me to convince to say yes to this are the menopausal and postmenopausal women, because they're going to hear things like cycle and syncing up and menstruation, and automatically they're going to decide that doesn't apply to them anymore. And so it's even having to be very creative in how I word it and what I talk about. And it's where, like I need help doing this. I need help from my colleagues and community as well, because since I have been talking more about this openly, this level of censorship that has even happened to some of my content is like, I can't even tell you how many of the things that I'm talking about are being buried in Google. That is, in June 3rd, like I'm sure you're aware of this, there was this massive level of blacklisting and censorship that came out that moved a lot of the pharmaceutical and medical things to the top. And any of us who were talking about, health and vitality and wellness, and some of like the most well-respected individuals, Dr. Kelly Brogan, Wellness Mama, Dr. Josh Axe, going from like hundreds of thousands of impressions on their work every day to literally nothing. Mm-hmm. And this is done on purpose. And what scared me, there's lots of things that scare me about it, but for the woman who's looking for the information to make a pro-informed choice about how she's going to manage her health, if she doesn't know the names or the appropriate people to be looking for, she will never find them if Google is how she educates herself.
That's powerful. And I was aware of that, but you just... such an important conversation, and it is shocking. And I did actually see recently you talking about the normalization of this conversation and what you were able to say on TV versus, maybe 10 years ago, which is incredible because I think normalizing things is where we need to go. And that's what community and being immersed in this context helps us do. But it is shocking.
Yes.
Because now you've got this amazing thing. How do we get it into the right people's hands?
Right. Because it's been, frustrating and at the same time lit us up in a different way as a company, because as we've been trying to put this information out there, all of a sudden we're getting blocked on certain things that we used to be able to post when I was just sharing recipes and talking about general hormone health. But all of a sudden now I am talking about alternatives to the pill. I'm talking about how to be pro-informed before you use something like an IUD. I'm talking about menstrual cups and blood clots and things like that. And all of a sudden now these like alerts have been put out there to the higher Bs, and they're trying to suppress this conversation. And I think the question we have to ask ourselves is why? When you look at the stats right now, when you look at what the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology is putting out there, they have said that the menstrual cycle is now the 5th vital sign. So this is a critical element of our health as a young girl and a woman that we need to know. In the same respect, though, one of the number one prescriptions that are being prescribed for young girls right now is the birth control pill. And more than 60% of young women who are put on the pill are not put on it for birth control. They are put on it to give them a period, to regulate their period, and for acne. The second application that is provided to women who are managing difficult menstrual cycles is the first thing that they'll be told to do is, well, let's put you on the pill to quote unquote regulate, which it doesn't regulate. It suppresses. It shuts down the part of your pituitary gland that's producing your follicular and luteinizing hormone. It prevents you from ovulating the entire time you're on the pill. If that doesn't work for the woman who has heavy menstrual cycles, pain, irregular cycles, the second thing that they recommend to her is to do a cervical ablation, to actually go in and use a laser to cauterize, to burn off the additional excess lining of her uterus that's causing the pain and the heavy flow. And when that doesn't work, the recommendation for this woman, the third prong, will be a partial or a radical hysterectomy. Like, seriously, is that the best we can offer for these women?
It's shocking. And the conversation is like, they don't know there's anything else out there.
Exactly. And this is the whole problem, is that because these conversations aren't happening and because we're normalizing the wrong thing, Michelle, right? Like we're normalizing the pain, the discomfort, and the suppression of it instead of let's normalize. Can we go deeper on this? Like, can we actually have, these conversations and start to do a better job at the education just leads to a more empowered woman. And one of the biggest reasons I firmly believe in like every cell of my body that as women, we are dealing with overwhelm, anxiety, depression, and this massive disconnect from ourselves is because we aren't empowered in our bodies. We are not educated. We are not made to feel like we matter and that we are enough. And so we search for it outside of ourselves when all of it lives inside of us. All of the answers, all of the cues, all of the resources, like it's literally inside of our body. But it's like owning something. Like I'll give an example. I'm not a very technology based person. Okay. So I own an iPhone. I use 3 apps on it. I don't understand how to use half of what that thing does. So for some people, they look at it as the most powerful tool of life that gives them accessibility to everything that they ever wanted. I look at it as a phone. I look at it as a means of, one form of connection. It doesn't light me up. It's where in your body, if there's systems and, if you will, like internal apps that you have that you can tune in and tap into to make life better, but you don't know how to use them and no one's teaching you, you'll live your whole life never tapping into that.
And leading to what you said earlier, that soul exhaustion, which I can so resonate with. I understand what you mean by that. And I wonder, and I assume you've come to the same realization, but the more you practice in this health space, the more you realize that what we need to go back to is our rhythms and understanding their circadian wisdom bestowed onto us. And, we're overcomplicating things.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And that is one of my hopes in this program is in the beginning, I understand people are going to feel confused because this is you're literally going back to school. This is it. And so we understand in a literal school sense that you're not going to get it right away and that it's going to take, repetition is what will create that retention and the understanding. We have to apply that same level of conception when it comes to this type of a program is that it's going to take you a couple of times of moving through it until you start to feel like you are in sync.
I love that. So take us through the menstrual cycle. Teach us.
Okay, so the menstrual cycle is actually the final phase of this is like I know, right? So because remember, the menstrual cycle is a result of all of the other 3 phases that have happened that lead into and prepare us for our actual menstruation. So when we are in the first phase of our cycle, this is actually the follicular phase, which is when our body is having a surge and an increase in key hormones like your follicular stimulating hormone and your estrogen. And this is when our body when those follicles that are on our ovaries are getting ripe and mature and ready. And this is also when, as a woman, mentally, physically, and emotionally, you will probably feel like you are at your best of the month. So think of how it feels when your cycle ends and you feel like, okay, like I'm getting back into my own headspace, back into my body. I have energy again. If there was any inflammatory things going on, they calm down around that week after your cycle. That is that follicular phase. And it is helping to set our body up to prime us to move into the second phase, which is our ovulation. So when the body is working to ripen those follicles, the second thing that happens after that period of time is that now the body will select an egg to burst or be released during ovulation. And that follicular phase for most women is somewhere between 7 to 10 days long. Now that can fluctuate. And I always use the word, I would say 7 to 10 days-ish, because no 2 women are the same. And then that ovulatory phase is typically anywhere from 2 to 4 days. Now, as a woman, we can truly only get pregnant within about a 24-hour window from that time of ovulation. But a man's sperm can live in our body for up to 5 days. And that's why there's really people will say there's a week where you need to be careful. I think this is also one of the big lies we've been taught about our body is that you can get pregnant any day of the week. So, create all the barriers ever possible so that you don't get pregnant any day of the month. And that's simply not the case. Now with ovulation, what is incredible is that this is when we have this massive surge of both estrogen and progesterone. When your body releases this egg, the leftover shell on the outside is called the corpus luteum. And your body works with different areas and cells in your system, your theca cells and your granulosa cells, and this leftover element of the egg to actually produce progesterone. So for the woman who is not ovulating, for the woman who is on synthetic hormones, whether it is hormone replacement therapy, the birth control pill, the Mirena IUD, the Depro shot, she is not ovulating. So if she's not ovulating, she is not producing that incredibly calm, restorative, and rejuvenating progesterone. She is getting a synthetic form progestin, which is nothing like what her body produces. Once ovulation has happened, this shifts us into the longest of the 4 phases in our cycle, and this is the luteal cycle. This is that period of time where the body is really starting to prepare us to kind of wind things down, to finish up projects, to, organize what needs to be done so that we can get ready for the winter. We can get ready for that hibernation or that fertile void, which is moving into our menstrual cycle. And so the week leading into our period, if we, or like leading into the new moon, and I'll talk about how the moon phases tap into this, if that week coming into our cycle, our schedule is super crazy, we are not getting good sleep, our blood sugar's unbalanced, we're not eating well, we just have everything and everyone coming at us, we start to become unhinged. And the reason that we will have cravings, breast tenderness, headaches, back aches, cramping, the body just feels like so off kilter and unwell, is because we're not balancing our blood sugar. We're not slowing down. We're not getting the rest. We're not preparing for this ultimate phase, which is our menstrual cycle, where we are literally shedding a lining of our physical body, but also mentally and emotionally. So your period is not just about the blood that is the lining, the tissue that you are releasing. It is also what else are you releasing and letting go of energetically that month. And what's really fascinating is that when I'm having women track, I will say, I really need you to pay attention when you do finally get your menstrual cycle. If you notice from month to month, it changes. Like you have an easy breezy cycle one month, but then the next month you just feel like it hammers you. You need to understand that you don't ovulate from the same ovary every month. And so we could have one ovary that is a little bit healthier or better functioning than the other. You also have to understand that all of the lifestyle choices that we are making for ourselves as a woman are going to show up in that menstrual phase. It's where we are doing the undoing and the letting go. And that follicular phase that I was talking about, in terms of ripening these follicles to their full potential, that typically for a woman is a 90 to 100 day internal rhythm that is happening. It is like a whole season in our body. And so when I'm working with women who repeatedly are having cycle issues, we don't just look back to their last few weeks. We look back what's been going on over the last few months. What was happening in your life, in your stress picture, your finances, relationships? How were you treating your body that has now led to the today that you are feeling right now? And so when you can start to empower a woman to understand all of these different elements, and I go into it in much greater depth in their actual written guidebook, there is this click that happens in their headspace. And now all of a sudden they start to do this connecting of the dots. And it's a really powerful moment because I see it when I'm doing Zoom calls with the women in the Hormone Project, where they're like, oh my gosh, do you know what happened right before or a couple months before when these cycles started to change? This, and that. And now they start to understand the true impact of what their lifestyle and what's happening to them outside, how it's impacting them inside.
Yeah, that's amazing. I like too that you contextualize it for them. Like just talking about, one period being worse than the other. I think when women can visualize the health of their body and what's going on and what that means for them, well, then it just empowers and gives them space to understand that better and be more compassionate. I feel like even when I was learning to practice out menstrual cycle and awareness and understanding even the mental state of each phase, I felt a new sense of compassion for the mental struggles of the luteal phase.
Yeah. And this is where, compassion is the key. Compassion and grace, right? Compassion for ourselves and grace in our approach. This is not, you can't do this. Like I always say to women, I don't hand out stickers and medals and trophies at the end of the programs. Like you did the best with your period. You did the, like you do, how you get rewarded is you have a much more calm, connected relationship with your body. And the realizations are the coolest part. It is literally where the magic happens for a woman in her body. And we unfortunately just think that if I'm not feeling good or I'm not seeing results, I'm going to hammer it harder. I'm going to put my foot on the pedal. I'm going to work out harder. I'm going to train more intensely. I'm going to do it more often, maybe twice a day. I'm going to change my eating. And we do it from all the external things. And it can be a hard one to get women to switch that mindset around it. But for that, I'll go through what the moon cycles are, just for the women listening that, are, like I said, are on the pill, who are pregnant as well too. So here's the other thing is that we get taught a lot in pregnancy. There's a lot of hormonal shifts that happen. And one of the other things to keep in mind is that this baby or babies that you are carrying in your body, they have their own endocrine system that, yes, is heavily influenced by ours as a mom, but we are wanting to live and nurture ourselves in a way where we're already starting to set that communication for their body. I know for me, when I was carrying a girl versus a boy, very different hormonal experience. When I carried my son, it was like he woke up every recessive androgenic, gene and potentiality in my body. And, I did a lot of work around that because it was such a different feeling than carrying a girl. And so for the women that are listening that are pregnant, menopausal, beyond, who don't have a menstrual cycle or who are on the pill, when you're on the, when you would be menstruating, typically most women will menstruate when the new moon is happening. And that new moon is a time of new beginnings, which is what our cycle is. It's that time of like letting go and creating those new beginnings. Now, not every woman is going to cycle with the new moon. And if you're listening to this, if you've never done any of this mapping, you might be at a totally different time of the month, and that's okay. This is what the whole program is about. We're going to bring you in sync. Now, what's really cool about the history and the ancient times of being menstruating women is that there's this really phenomenal book called The Red Tent. You are creating this within your rebel tribe. Like you've created this village and this community, this kula for women. And back in, historical times, and there are still some villages and tribes around the world that follow this. Around the new moon is when majority of the village women would menstruate. So they all went to the red tent. This is where they had their commune. This is where they would connect. This is where they would support one another and take care of one another. This is where they would have their big conversations and discussions, is when they would all menstruate together. Now, women in now day and age, we can get this because if you work with a lot of female coworkers, you probably start to get periods around the same time. If you're living in a household with other women, you probably start to get your periods around the same time. Well, with this moon, the women historically that were referred to as the medicine women, or the women that were the ones who helped to heal the tribe on the highest level, they typically menstruated with the full moon and were considered to be red moon bleeders and not white moon. And that is because those women would take care of the other women in the village during the new moon when they would bleed. Once those women had moved through that cycle, that's when they would give their body the opportunity for them to have their bleed. And so I think that's just a really cool part to note. But once you've gone through the new moon phase, what comes after the new moon is the waxing moon. So just like the new moon appears to grow in the days that follow that full moon, the follicular phase of your period, that's a cycle of growth as well. And so when you are following the moon cycle, for the woman after the new moon, that waxing moon, you would follow the same principles and the same guides that are given to you in the guidebook and the program, mentally, physically, and emotionally and nutritionally, to help to bring your body in sync with that moon cycle. Now, the ovulatory phase for most women is around the full moon. And this is when that body is like preparing to release that egg. And this is where that full ripening is happening of those follicles. For women that aren't menstruating, that full moon time, this is like a highly intuitive period of time. This is can be a very sexually charged time as well too for women, where you'll feel maybe more vivacious and more feminine. Libido might be heightened. Your excitement for life and for the things that you're doing, wanting to create something new. This is where a lot of of your downloads, your visions come to you, oftentimes in the strangest moments when you're driving or showering and you don't have a pen and those types of things. But tuning in to your dreams around that time and to just those pondering moments can really powerfully help to sync you up in that moon phase. And then just like the luteal phase is the longest of that menstruating phase, the waning moon is the longest as well too. It goes through a few different variations. And this is that time when you need to really tune in with really understanding what is working and what isn't working. What do you need to shed and let go? And that is what, again, then prepares you for the new moon, which is that ultimate phase of shedding.
I love that. I wonder, because once I became aware of this divine intelligence that we had within us, I started to restructure everything I did, to booking podcast interviews, to speaking engagements. If I could control it, I would wait for ovulation. Is this something you're, advocating for or doing for yourself? And do you find a difference?
So I try very hard to do that. Sometimes the scheduling part is out of our control, right? Based on what other people's schedules are. But I will tell you, when I do show up in accordance to my cycles, there is so much more ease and simplicity within everything that I do. And then there's those months where I don't do that. I, go based on someone else's schedule. I fall, kind of off the cycling wagon of paying attention to those things. And I still track every month, but I sometimes lose sight of the connection to my calendar of life outside of my calendar, the app. And so it's a constant redirection, and so what it takes for me personally is it takes me feeling overwhelmed and worn down to be like, okay, Jen, just like lean back into what you know, listen to your body. Don't worry about missing out on something or not hitting a certain target in your business and that is the constant struggle I feel for a lot of us as women is fear of missing out, trying to keep up with everyone else. We set these gregarious goals for ourselves, and that is what we're really working against. We're not working against, the calendar or the moon. That's what's trying to pull us in. We're working against ourselves. We're working against trusting that if we take a do less approach, we can still have and feel and create all the dreams and things that we want to do, but we can just feel a whole lot better in the process. And that is my constant lesson to myself and for myself as a woman.
I love that. I love too, for a lot of women who have never heard this before, I love that just the visual of looking at the moon and being able to visually see that. Yes, you have an app, but there's also a way you could be just checking in your environment. Like, oh, okay, cool. Like just a quick check in. One of the cool things that I've noticed with being able to teach women in this way and talk to them about this is that we've actually found them come back and express us how much more balanced their life feels, how they're able to actually increase their performance or their sales and it goes totally against everything they've ever been told in terms of how to perform.
Yes, 100%. And I would say that too, like my best work that I put out into the world happens in the first half of my cycle. The deepest conversations I have in my relationships happen towards the end of my cycle before I get my period. And what I do is in the week leading into my cycle, that is when I book my monthly appointment with my chiropractor, my osteopath, my energy healer that I work with. That's when I do the things where I know I need the extra TLC for myself. So yeah, it's so cool when you just start to tap in. It's a really amazing experience when you can just trust.
Yeah, it's so brilliant. And I really admire you for bringing this out in a way for so many women to be impacted by this and inspired, because this is such important information. It's a total superpower.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's, I want to say thank you so much for having me on to talk about it, because like I said earlier, this is the way that it is going to change, is to bring it to more women's attention.
Yeah, there's some very lucky women in the near future are going to be empowered. And it'll be very exciting to see that kind of data coming back, like how it's transforming. And because I know it's inevitable. I've seen it. It's so inspiring. It's really, really powerful. I would love to ask you what simplicity means to you.
Oh, simplicity is for me, it's what happens in the in-between. It's a feeling for me that first happens in my breath. So it's a sensation more than it is a description. I know I'm living with simplicity when my breath comes to me with ease, when my jaw is unclenched, when my shoulders are down, when my chest is warm, and when I don't feel overwhelmed in my brain and I'm not moving quick. So simplicity is a sensation for me.
Is there a moment in your life, like a perceived mistake or failure, that you feel incredibly grateful for because you feel like it propelled you forward?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's multiple, but I think when I used to own a brick and mortar yoga and Pilates studio, and I made the decision to sell it. And it rocked a lot of people in a very beautiful way. They were so sad because we had created this in-person physical community that was really a second home for hundreds of women where I live, and my staff and everyone. And I decided to close it when we were actually at our peak, meaning everything was going fantastic. And that had been after years of things, like, oh my gosh, you own a brick and mortar business. The first few years, you are just like questioning everything. And I had like multiple 4-day weekends just crying on the couch, being like, what in the world am I doing? And is it all worth it? And I made big shifts in my own self and in the business, and everything was going great. And it was in the moment when everything was going great where I literally heard this voice that said, like, you've done it. You created the community that need to be created. Like you can move on now. And I couldn't let go of this voice in my head. I knew I wanted to do what we're doing right now. I wanted to be able to educate women globally. And I couldn't do that if I was physically in one space. And so I made the decision to sell it. And it was very painful. I actually made myself part of the sale for the first 6 months and kept teaching there because I just didn't want to let it go on an energy level, even though intellectually I knew I needed to. And that was like the worst thing I could have done because I was too attached to it. When I fully stepped out, I had no idea how tired I was. And I had all these ideas and visions I wanted to create. And I literally, Michelle, for that next year, lied on the couch, walked outside, drank tea, and did nothing. I was so exhausted on every level because of what I had put into it. And for a while, I felt like I had failed. Like, why did I sell it? Now I'm doing nothing. At least when I was there, I had this going on. And none of the things that I thought were going to happen were happening at the speed that I had put the pressure on myself for. And that ended up being one of the biggest gifts of my life, was all the quiet time and the blank space. And those walks became my meditation. And now I look back at that and I'm like, there is no way I would even be having this conversation with you now. The Hormone Project wouldn't exist. My books wouldn't be there. Synced would not have existed if that moment in time did not happen for me.
Well, you're speaking right to my heart. Being 2.5 years in, I'm like, oh my gosh, I completely identify with what you're saying. And I really love your honesty with that. What makes you rebellious?
Ooh, like what's happening right now, censorship, the lack of freedom of speech. And because I feel like censorship treats us like children, that we need to be protected and put in this bubble of what we should and shouldn't know. And I believe we need to be treated like adults, and we need to be treated like the empowered, amazing humans that we are, not just women, but men, children, all of us. We need to understand and know more, and we need to be gifted with the ability to have enough information to make choices for ourselves. So when the higher B's, and especially when money is involved in it, when there are pharmaceutical companies and there is an industry that gets behind this level of suppression, it makes my blood boil because it is so wrong on so many levels. Whether you are pro or against anything that is out there that's available to us for our bodies, that's not the discussion. The discussion is, are you pro-choice? Because that's what this comes down to. We all deserve to be informed enough to make decisions about our health, our body, and our lives. And so what fires me up and wants me to like rebel and push back is when you tell me that I don't have that right.
Yep. That's a good one.
Yeah. I'm sweating right now as we're talking
You're
about
getting me
that.
fired up too. I know. It's a really important conversation. I'm really glad you brought that up because I don't know if everybody knows this is happening.
Oh, I can tell you they don't. And you know what's really interesting is, as I've been talking more about the menstrual stuff and that, all these women are reaching out. No one else is talking about this. Thank you so much. And I'm like, frig, now I know why no one else is talking about it how I am, because it's connected to money and I get it. Listen, I've had very lengthy conversations with my team and my husband in these last few weeks and going, okay, if this got to the point, because there are countries right now where if you are repeatedly talking about things that their government or they do not agree with, not only will they shut down your Facebook, your Instagram, they will block your website from everything, and they will actually freeze your PayPal account. So when your whole business is tied up into this, it's a scary freaking thing to think about. And what I've said to my team and my husband is, this is why, for anyone listening who has this idea that they want to be exclusively online, here's what I'm going to tell you. Your in-person community matters more than ever right now. So because God forbid something were to happen that collapsed my business in that way, for 23 years, I have built human relationships with real life people. And if it came down to the point where I couldn't teach these things online, my house would become the school. I have relationships with other clinics, with other stores, with other people in the community where I could physically go and still educate and do this work. And I'm telling those of you listening, being online has transformed my life. I am so grateful for it. But please don't ever believe for a moment that you don't need to have a community connection, because those people are who are going to be there and rally for you and your purpose and your mission. And you need them as much as they need you.
Well, that gives me goosebumps. I'm speechless. It's so important. And I just really admire you for shining a light on that. I was at Mindshare this year and they were talking with Dr. Joseph Mercola about his censorship. Yeah. And Kelly Brogan posted it, like the traffic being zero.
Yes.
It's a shocking thing. And you're right. It always will come down to, and it's great. It's great to expand your impact and be visible and be able to help more people and show up in that capacity. But never forget what really truly matters, and that you still have such a strong, and your house is already your school. So
it is, right? And so this is, yeah.
All right. I have some rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Sure.
What is your superpower?
This. My superpower is being able to teach women the language of their bodies and break down what can otherwise feel as a very complicated topic. That my superpower is.
You do that beautifully. When it comes to your health, what gives you your superpowers?
Movement. It is moving my body. It is the thing that gets me back into who I am the quickest.
Best piece of advice you've ever received?
That energy flows where attention goes.
How do you define your tribe?
The most heart-led, heart-centered, genuine women who truly care about themselves and the collective.
Amazing. What do you do to fuel your wild heart?
Have conversations like this and hug multiple people daily.
I love that. Well, if people didn't know about you before or didn't understand my total adoration for you, they get it now. Thank you for who you are and what you do, and creating a platform and a voice for women to know a different way and to be empowered and stand in their power and realize that everything was already within them and you are just helping them reclaim that.
Thank you so much. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on and to talk about this. And thank you for doing the work that you are doing, because I am watching it and seeing it and feeling it. It's palpable through your media and through this. I just want to congratulate you on that, because as women, we need the fist pumping from other women. We need other women to say, I see you, I hear you, and I am cheering you on. Because ladies, the only way we are going to get better in every sense of the word is if you link arms with one another.
Mm-hmm. And I feel that in the most deeply powerful way, which is completely transforming my story and my narrative from an earlier age. But when I started to level up and just truly embrace that that truth, it was like, all I feel is love and support from really inspiring, awesome women. What a cool thing to actually learn.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. And this is the wish I have for young girls. Like when I watch my daughter and I listen to her talk about stuff at school, I'm just like, oh, it's hard as a mom. Like you want to help, but you also want to stay back and just be like, okay, I just want to see what you do with this. And it's an interesting time for it. So, it's going to take moms and women like us that are okay, not necessarily being the popular one sometimes, to shake it up and to have these talks.
Yeah. I have one quick selfish question.
Yeah.
What do you think, what would you do or how do you approach it if when your daughter gets her period, when women have daughters get their period, are you creating an event? Are you making this a really special transformation? Do you have any ideas about this?
So I think that depends on your daughter. I think it depends on what her energy is around it. For us in our house, I made it a very common conversation around the age of 8 or 9, because in working with women, I know that some of their girls were getting their periods very early. So it was just a very, this is some of the feelings you might start to have in your body. These are some of the sensations. This is what you might notice maybe in your underwear one day. And I'm just going to put a couple of these organic little panty liners in a little bag in your backpack. And you can keep it in your locker, or you have it for you, or you have it for a friend if they need it, if they get it before you at school. That's what it started with for us. When the cycle actually happened, for me, I couldn't help but like high five her. Because I was so excited about it, and I could tell that she was too. And I just keep it a very open dialogue. One thing I did for her, and again, this is just kind of normal in our household, is I had her work with a classical homeopath when she first got it, because I knew her constitutional remedy would change at that time. And I wanted her to be able to have something as a tool that she could tap into when and if she needed that. So, and I keep the energy around our house very in state. Like my son is privy to all the things I talk about and learn in conversations, because I want him to understand what a woman goes through. And I want him to be the boy in class that if a girl bleeds through her pants, he takes his sweatshirt off to give it to her to wrap around her waist. I want him to be the kid that instead of calling a girl bitchy, or when he has a girlfriend and she's got her cycle that she's being moody and all PMS-y, that he gets where she's coming from. And so I think it's about educating our girls and celebrating that, but also letting our boys know too, this is a normal, amazing part of life. And P.S., you wouldn't be here if we didn't do this.
I'm really glad I asked you that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Where do women find you? How do they get synced? How do they connect with you?
Yeah, so Synced is, I don't know when this is airing, but right now up until October 23rd, we have our early bird where they can save $50 off the program. And they can do that by visiting jenpike.com. It's with 2 N's. They can also follow me on Instagram, which is Jen Pike. And those are the 2 best ways to stay connected with us and to have access to the program.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. We would also love it if you shared this episode with your friends. We want every woman who wants to learn more to be able to access this awesome information. Help us spread the message like wildfire.
The Rebel Talk podcast is brought to you by the Poppy Clinic. To learn more, check us out at poppyclinic.com.